been a while, hasn't it? Hello everyone, my name's Will, known to some of you I'm sure as Boris. This channel is changing. You see, I want this place to be somewhere that me and my subscribers can have interesting debate and discussion about various subjects that interest me, things that you guys are really passionate about, and generally we can share interests in fields and subjects that otherwise we might never have had the opportunity to talk about. So with that in mind, we're going to start today with the first of one of those such videos. It's an idiot's guide to Formula 1.
And it's lights out and away we go!
Hakkinen is a full 10 kilometres an hour faster.
It's going to be too late. Wheel to wheel stuff. Look at this, they're almost touching. Mansell gets in there and send it back on the inside.
Eli siitä, että missä sen... That's it.
Down the track there, just enough to loosen off the heavily loaded left rear tyre. Straight to the scene of the accident.
Norris might yet take fifth, you know, as he goes wide there. It's Norris in
Obviously, just for clarification, I am the idiot in this scenario, unless you also are an idiot, in which case you can play along at home. Now, I'm a relatively new convert to Formula 1. I've only really gotten to grips with how the sport works and fully started to understand those deep-rooted on-track rivalries within the last 6 months. But to convince you of its merits, and to prove that this sport is rather more than just rich people sitting around drinking martinis and champagne while other rich people drive around a very long circuit, we need to start at the beginning. Before F1 was governed and ruled by the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, or FIA, it was a very different beast. Originating in the 1920s and 30s under the catchy name European Championship of Grand Prix Motor Racing, it was primarily the pursuit of the foolhardy and wealthy, those who could afford to throw away both large sums of money and, if it came to it, their lives. Safety wasn't completely overlooked, and the original governing body of that championship did introduce some measures and rules on car weight, engine size and size of the car. And this is actually where the name formula was first used in conjunction with the sport. It was a formula of rules laid out that all teams had to abide by. But in truth, this was also a way to stop larger teams over-innovating and gaining unfair advantages. However, the championship was soon suspended due to the outbreak of the Second World War, and eventually got going again in 1946, with various governing bodies agreeing finally on a formal set of rules in 1947. Eventually, in 1950, the first proper championship got underway, where Alfa Romeo's Giuseppe Farina narrowly beat out his teammate Juan Manuel Fangio to win the championship. This didn't stop Fangio, however.
Fangio is keeping up a fantastic average speed, now over 120 miles an hour, and as always, Moss is right there behind him. Fangio accelerates again. The crown of an unforgettable day and of a Belgian Grand Prix high in the tradition of the great Francorchamps circuit.
He went on to not only win the 1951, 54, 55, 56 and 57 championships, but also become one of the sport's most legendary drivers alongside his rival Stirling Moss, who sadly passed away earlier this year. Now, hopefully that's given you a brief idea as to the early beginnings and conception of Formula 1, but in truth I've barely scratched the surface. I recommend you go and do some of your own research, because the 50s and 60s was an intensely dangerous era for drivers. We haven't even talked about the fact that spectators as well were killed at vast numbers. For example, in 1961 at the Monza Grand Prix, the Ferrari driver Von Trips, shortly after the beginning of the race, crashed into 15 spectators, killing all of them and himself. And yet their bodies were simply moved to the side so the race could continue. That was the blasé attitude to life and death. It was simply part of the sport, a given almost. That's why it's quite reassuring to see that the FIA's current policy is definitely health and safety first, as quite rightly it should be. But from those early days right through to this year's current quarantine 2020 season, there has been one constant, a factor that has played a part in many drivers' motivation and in the entire sport staying afloat. It is, of course, the fans, the spectators and the supporters, the people who will make great efforts and go to great lengths to fly to wherever it is their team might be racing or drive long hours to cheer on their favourite drivers. So with that in mind, we should ask the question, why is F1 so captivating? Essentially, it's the pure thrill of seeing two men battle it out to go faster than the other. The tight-fought contests between the legendary likes of Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost during the 1990 series, and that infamous crash at Suzuka that stopped Prost from taking the championship. Or Schumacher versus Hakkinen, a rivalry filled more with respect and dignity, but tense enough to keep fans on the edge of their seat.
No, Murray, he has got the slipstream. We know he's got 10 kilometres an hour extra, but Michael Schumacher very firmly closing the door, leaving Hakkinen nowhere to go at all. Hakkinen had the speed, he didn't have anywhere to use it. And then Hakkinen with the extra straight line speed. And once again, look, Michael's having to defend, and Mika, and there's but the back mark is in the way. Can he do it? Yes, he's done it. A brilliant move there, either side of Zonta, and Hakkinen brilliantly takes the lead of the Belgian Grand Prix.
It even led Schumacher to admit that, as James May put it,
Michael Schumacher said that you were the only driver he really feared.
My point is that you don't need to look very hard to find some awesome examples of battles and storylines where drivers and teams overcame difficulty to come out on top. Most recently, Rosberg and Hamilton fought it out in 2016.
Has he outbraked himself? Yes, he has, Lewis Hamilton.
Even this season, we've seen the start of rivalries between midfield teams like McLaren and the pink Mercedes. Racing Point. Not the pink Mercedes. They're not just a Mercedes from last year, copied straight over and painted pink. In any way, that would be hilarious. So, how does an F1 race work? Well, on a normal race weekend, the 10 different teams, who each field 2 cars and 2 drivers, will arrive usually 3 or 4 days before the race, which often takes place on a Sunday. They hold 2 free practice sessions on Friday, which is a chance for teams to get to grips with the car and test the track. Saturday also has another free practice session, but then is followed by the main event, which is qualifying. Qualifying is split into 3 different sections and determines where a driver will start on the grid on race day. Each driver has a certain time limit to set as fast a lap as he can manage and to advance to the next stage of qualifying and increase their position on the grid. It's essentially a way of weeding out the less competitive drivers until you are left on qualifying 3 with the top 10. This is a crucial time for teams, as it not only improves their chances of a win in the race, but also gives rivals a proper insight into how fast the competition is. Then eventually, we get to Sunday.
And radio check, please.
The day when it all matters.
Welcome to the Red Bull Ring.
When the drivers are let loose for real. Mistakes can happen. Cars collide at the first corner.
And it's lights out, away we go. Verstappen gets an excellent start. Sebastian Vettel will need to cover him off. Kimi Raikkonen on the inside, and he's cracked with Verstappen. He's hit Vettel as well. Raikkonen is out.
Points and titles are on the line, won and lost. The pit crews and entire teams are charged full of adrenaline.
Because Bottas is coming into the pits as well, and he's waiting, and they have got this absolutely spot on. Valtteri Bottas didn't have to slow down any more than he was required to.
Everything's on the line. That is what makes race day so exciting.
The choreography of that is sensational.
But it's not just about those few hours of cars really going for it. What about technology? Now, F1 has been the testing and developing platform for a number of new technologies, right since the early days where Jack Brabham proved the superiority of a mid-engined car and Lotus developed the first ever monocoque chassis, through to the more sophisticated crash helmet designs and the new introduction of the halo for added driver safety. These new developments often find their way into normal commercial automotive production and generally are a good thing for the consumers, but they're also crucially a way for teams to exploit very minute loopholes in the FIA ruling to try and gain those extra tenths of seconds. The famous Braun GP double diffuser and the current Mercedes DAS system are examples of teams finding creative and intricate ways to try and gain a few seconds or tenths of seconds. But with such close margins for gain and huge investment in engines and aerodynamics, there is naturally a history of clandestine affairs and scandal between teams, which is another compelling part of the sport as drama unfolds each and every season. One such example is the well-documented 2007 Spygate saga, where a former Ferrari employee traded secrets with Mike Coughlin, a senior McLaren engineer. I won't spoil the story as it's a very intriguing one, and I'll link below if you fancy watching a full video explanation, but suffice it to say, there are many examples within the sport's history of dodgy deals and sneaky tactics, which only adds to the drama and excitement. But what about the current season? Why should I watch it? Well, there are three main reasons in my opinion. Firstly, the midfield battle, secondly, Lando Norris, and thirdly, the fluid driver market. So firstly, what do I mean by the midfield battle? Well, currently the Lewis Hamilton-Valtteri Bottas pairing at Mercedes are once more dominant, and their car looks to have the upper hand by quite some margin. This means that the main interest for fans will be seeing how the mid-table teams battle it out, specifically for teams like McLaren, who have shown recent form and exciting driving style, and also Racing Point and Renault, who are all competing to be the best of the rest. The reason this is so exciting is that all those teams are very, very close in terms of pace, driver skill and expertise. Secondly, Lando Norris. Now, if you're new to F1, you might not know who Lando is, and that's okay, but suffice it to say, he's one of the standout characters on the grid. He's a rookie for McLaren at the moment, and a pretty good one at that, recently claiming a P3 podium in Austria. What a race that was, by the way. If you haven't seen the race highlights, go and watch it, it was incredible. But most importantly, he has made the sport relatable again. By using his Twitch streaming account, his Instagram and YouTube profiles to great success, he's managed to engage and bring to life a whole section of supporters that the sport had totally forgotten, the people on the internet. But he most importantly has shown spectators that he is a genuine person, and that in turn has allowed so many other drivers to come out of their skin and actually chat to the camera in a much more candid and honest manner. This is something which is so refreshing, given that F1 for a long time was quite rightly criticised for being far too clinical, dull and frankly beige. So seeing him bring to life a whole grid of drivers, frankly, is a very good thing. Lastly, the driver market and its ability this year to really change the face of the championship for 2021. Now, as I've said, I only became a fan recently, so hearing about all the rumour and gossip surrounding drivers and silly season, people changing teams or being forced out of contracts, it all sounded a bit confusing. But rest assured, I would argue that for most people, a quick 5-minute Google on any of the subject matters, such as Sebastian Vettel being let go from Ferrari or Daniel Ricciardo moving to McLaren, would yield a wealth of history and information on why these are very significant developments. Let's take the Danny Ric situation, for example. After driving with Red Bull for 5 years and having some mild success, although not in the realms to which he was hoping, he left the very Max Verstappen dominant team and went to drive for Renault, who around 2019 were making quite big developments and seemed to be the best of the rest. However, after just a year at Renault, it was announced he would move to McLaren for next year. This came as a bit of a shock, at least to some Renault fans, because there is a strong argument to be made that he hasn't given Renault enough time to prove their worth. On the other hand, the fact that the team has made so few developments to the car and struggled with power and reliability issues makes Ricciardo's choice to move to McLaren quite understandable, as they're a team that has made big improvements and created, crucially, a really friendly team environment. The point is that all these different stories and narratives play out to show a team and driver's intent for the coming season, and offer a really exciting look at possible driver pairings. It's essentially more drama. All in all, the fighting spirit of the 1950s and 60s does still run true. Crashes and spins are sadly for some still present, and while the sport has sacrificed some of its style for the sake of safety, I would still encourage people to give F1 a chance. Begin by watching some compilations on YouTube of its heydays, and also one of Lando's or Charles Leclerc's streams to get a feel for who the modern driver really is. Now, at this stage of the video, if you're still not 100% convinced to become a die-hard F1 fan, that's perfectly fine. Each to his own, I say. Loads of people love football and go nuts for it. Personally, I'm not bothered by it whatsoever. However, I would say this. Why not give one GP, one race a go? You might not like it, and that's totally fine, but at least you've given it a try. And who knows, you might discover you absolutely love it. Because at the end of the day, Formula 1 is so much more than what it appears to be on the surface. It's the tension and on-track battles, the euphoria of the glory, the heartbreak of a close call, the diving down narrowing gaps, the team battles and the team orders, the on-track action and the off-track debate. It is a fantastic melting pot of intoxicating elements that overall combine to make it one of the most entertaining sports on the planet.
Okay, can you just increase the volume to be safe for the race? Radio check.
5 lights are on. It's lights out, away we go. Vettel, Lance Stroll, defends down the inside, goes very early to defend, but it's powerless to defend.
Fine, and he brakes later too. He just gauges his braking, and they're going to be so close into two. Takagi climbing up and down, and off they both go.
Max Verstappen over the hill, comes wheel to wheel with Lewis Hamilton, round the outside of turn 1 he goes. Verstappen's got the restart sorted. That was fantastic.
Austria, Martin was like frothing for it, so I was like, I feel like there's some real sick bastards around here.
You know, if I keep going the same line, we'll crash.
Don't keep going.
You know, you gotta either be blind or stupid to not see me, but you know, it's racing.
Airbox in the wings, and yet you're still extremely fast. How do you do it?
Big balls.
Oh, that's Hakkinen, the race leader. He's out of the race. He's out of the race.
It's Sebastian Vettel for Red Bull. 3 constructors titles in a row. Grosjean loses it, spins 360 degrees. Here goes Charles Leclerc down the inside on Sergio Perez. Oh, that was late. That was brilliant. Look at this, Raikkonen and Schumacher inches apart. That was absolutely sensational.
So guys, that's it for today's video. This one was quite a long one to write the script for and source material and edit and film, so hopefully you've actually enjoyed it. I will be doing some more of these kinds of videos in the future. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Do comment down below if there were things in this Formula 1 review that you thought I didn't quite nail, or a point that you think maybe I should have just clarified a bit more clearly. I'm always trying to improve, and any advice that you've got would be really appreciated. Hopefully you're all staying well in these rather difficult times, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys on the channel very soon. Take care, goodbye. What is that?